Yes, Never Shout Never.
I'm in trouble, I'm an addict, I'm addicted to this girl.
Although eventually it was turned into a full electric band, Never Shout Never was originally the moniker of the solo electroacoustic emo pop project of a cutesy teenager from Joplin, Missouri named Christopher Drew Engel. He started the project in 2007 when he was 16 years old and rapidly gained a crazy amount of success on Myspace. Dude was practically the king of Myspace, before getting signed to major label Warner Brothers Records and going on tour full time. During these early years, Chris was an innocent Midwestern kid writing feel-good, catchy acoustic love songs and experiencing fame for the first time. This was before Chris started becoming outspoken about his marijuana and psychedelic use and getting face tattoos and generally going nuts as this weird hippie persona he adopted later on. No, in this video we'll be dissecting the original Never Shout Never, back when Never Shout Never was one word and had an exclamation point at the end, when Christopher Drew was the king of Myspace and everyone wanted to either be with him or be him, before he changed up his musical style and tried to rebel against what originally made him tick in the first place. Yes, I am the cozy representative, and this is the story of Never Shout Never, Part 1, the Myspace era. Let's go.
I just recorded this song in the studio with Kevin, and it sounds better than I could possibly imagine it sounding. If timing's everything, stop telling me you're taking your time. I know you're anxious, but you're running your mouth like you're 5 years old again. So hard to protect.
So, let's start off with a history lesson, shall we? Never Shout Never started around 2007, but prior to the inception of Never Shout Never, possibly around 2006, Chris had a different original project called The Passing Time when he was around 15 or 16 years old. The Passing Time was the earliest version of Never Shout Never, where Chris first experimented with bouncy, electro-infused power pop as well as slower acoustic songs. Two early The Passing Time songs actually eventually became Never Shout Never songs, one being Dare for Distance.
I got the concept and came to the conclusion that the top floor is just an illusion.
And the other being a very rough early version of My Friend Jane.
See, this girl's got a problem. Every time something good comes around, it takes a toll on her house. If you knew her.
At this time, the chiller electroacoustic sound of The Passing Time was new for Chris. His main project was a band that he had with his high school friend Hayden Kaiser called Strip the Colors, a heavier metalcore-inspired act, or as they described it, heavy electronic rock and roll. Inspired by bands such as Drop Dead Gorgeous. No, that was not a song by Strip the Colors, but it was an old Drop Dead Gorgeous song called Love is Murder, with a very young 2006 Christopher Drew doing some weird video overdub to it. Actually, there is no Strip the Colors music available online as far as I can find, at least under that name. However, Chris and Hayden did eventually evolve the project into what we know today as Eat Me While I'm Hot, so there's a good chance that Strip the Colors sounded something like this early Eat Me While I'm Hot song. Anyways, we're not talking about Strip the Colors or Eat Me While I'm Hot in this video, so let's get back on track, shall we? Okay, the passing time. So, around this time, this burgeoning wave of kids uploading their catchy, lo-fi, home-recorded electro-pop music to websites like Myspace and Pure Volume was a relatively new thing. And was coming to prominence with artists like, oh, I don't know, early A Rocket to the Moon.
So wake up, she said, I never left, I'm here, she said.
Or Old Owl City.
Hello, Seattle.
Or Play Radio Play.
I am a pirate, you are a princess. We could sail the seven seas.
And things like that around 2006 and 2007, while Chris was getting his start doing the passing time. At this point, these artists were more inspired by bands like the Postal Service or early Dashboard Confessional or One Line Drawing and stuff like that. And this particular wave of MySpace scene musicians wasn't oversaturated with obnoxiously flippy-haired, ukulele-toting dudes writing overly cutesy summer jams and calling themselves names like Nicosaur and stuff like that. That style of MySpace culture came a year or two later and was practically spearheaded, practically pioneered, by the sheer influence of what Christopher Drew started doing with the project he began after the passing time, Never Shout Never. Whether Chris wanted it or not, whether he was prepared for it or not, the style he began going for with Never Shout Never, both musically and aesthetically, practically became the blueprint for what wannabe electroacoustic MySpace artists all over the world wanted to achieve for a few years directly after Chris started blowing up. The quick rise and overall influence of Never Shout Never was monumental and earth-shattering. He was truly the poster boy for an entire movement, an entire wave, an entire culture as far as MySpace in the late 2000s goes. And how exactly does a goofy teenage kid from Missouri achieve all this with just a few EPs, some MySpace blogs, and a few choice photo shoots? Well, let's dive in and dissect this, shall we? So, Never Shout Never officially began with humble beginnings in September of 2007.
If it's not those cowboy boots in the summer, oh my God, I pray for another chance to drive down back highways, to stumble upon your beautiful face. The present season, what kills me is that artistic gleam.
Interestingly enough, it seems Chris Drew had a couple different names in mind for his new project before finally settling on Never Shout Never. On his old Photo Bucket account, username Strip the Colors, if you want to check that out, I found a couple different MySpace banners he made right around the time he was starting Never Shout Never. It seems Chris was toying around with some ideas, the first one being Sandals on Sunday, and then Never Say Never, and then finally, Never Shout Never. Pretty funny that Never Shout Never could have been called Sandals on Sunday, am I right? I wonder if that would have changed the trajectory of his career at all. Anyways, the earliest Never Shout Never songs sound like more evolved and fleshed out versions of the songs he was doing with the passing time, relying heavily on a more synthy, electro-based style as opposed to the more acoustic style he later became known for. These early songs included Lover's Love, Liar's Lie,
Take photographs, take all your memories. We got some packing to do, we got some packing to do.
and Sky High Standard.
I don't know how to put this right, except I'm screaming at the stoplight now.
Amongst others.
I got a taste of the way you wear yourself, and I know I can live my life like that. Everybody knows, obviously shows.
very first official release from Never Shout Never came on February 29th, 2008, entitled the Demo-Shmemo. This was an iTunes-only release, and was the first release where Chris really came across the signature Never Shout Never sound that he began growing from and evolving off of. Gone were the electronic program drums and synth-heavy instrumentals of the electro, techno-based Never Shout Never songs he started out with. The songs on the Demo-Shmemo are a lot chiller and are for the most part entirely acoustic-based smooth slow jams. The EP starts out with a song called Smell You Later, and subsequently so does the official discography and career of Never Shout Never. This track starts off slow and melancholy, with Chris expressing his heartbrokenness over the fact that he can't get through to a girl who is seemingly beginning to lose interest in him and cut him off. After starting off the track with this expression of sadness and agitation, the track breaks into a mildly upbeat dance beat and a quicker rhythm on the prominent acoustic guitars before Chris exclaims the following lyric. Everybody's going to the party and we're having a good time, and I'm feeling alright tonight, with a better judgment. With this, the song went from being a Dashboard Confessional-esque somber emo jam to a feel-good, smile-inducing dance fest. This set the tone for not only the rest of this demo, but in a lot of ways the mission statement and the vibe of Never Shout Never as a whole. An innocent kid who comes from a background of emo and sadness and suffering in a small town, who decides to say fuck it. I'm going to try to smile and be happy and generally approach life in a positive manner as a personal defense mechanism against life's shortcomings and heartaches. Acting like a goofball and trying to make other people smile as a reaction to the pain you've once felt and didn't know what to do about. That was the whole essence of Chris during these early years of Never Shout Never, and it was such a breath of fresh air in a scene where heartbreak and being melancholy and hopelessness were the norms and were so trendy. Where every band had jet black hair and lyrics about like going to the mall and killing yourself or whatever, Chris's smiling face and positive energy was infectious. And it all stems back to the very first song on the very first demo he ever released. The EP also featured re-recorded, more fleshed out versions of those two songs he originally used for The Passing Time, My Friend Jane as well as Dare for Distance, as well as one of my personal favorite Never Shout Never songs, She's Got Style.
Girl, you got style. You got some love about you.
It also had a dramatic, somber, piano-based closing track called Over the Years, which lyrically is the most emo he got on this demo. After the release of the Demo-Shmemo, Chris began playing shows around his hometown of Joplin, as well as going out on little mini-tours throughout the Midwest, and not to mention absolutely blowing up on Myspace.
You've had phenomenal success online. I mean, they say that you've had over 30,000 plays a day on some of your song. What has the online market done for your career?
Pretty much it's given me a career, more or less. I mean, without online, like, I would be nowhere, because, I mean, I've only been doing Never Shout Never for almost a year now, and really that's the only way that I promoted, like, by myself, to get to, like, the point where I would get a manager and whatnot, like,
right.
That's all I did was online.
What does it feel like to know that you've had 30,000 plays in one day from one of your songs?
I don't know, I mean, that's more people than my town, so, I mean, it's crazy.
The Never Shout Never hype machine was just getting revved up, and kids around the country, as well as record labels and music publications, were starting to take notice. And that leads us to part 3, the Yippee EP.
Sweet. So, hello everyone, I'm Chris. If you don't know, if you came with a friend or something. But, I'm from Joplin. I just flew out here last night. Got here about midnight, so I'm running on a little bit of sleep. And, it was good. This is the first time I've ever been in, like, a real big city before, so I'm from Hicktown, Missouri, so you guys are a little, I don't know, you guys are used to it, so I'm still a little bit in shock, but, yeah, I'm gonna play, I think, 9 songs.
Nice.
Yeah, some new ones, some old ones, and some off the EP. Covers? Covers? Should I, any covers? I can try that, maybe. But, yeah, sweet. This song is, it's number 3 on the EP. It's called Smell You Later. I know that I've been dancing around the truth.
On July 29th, 2008, the first official Never Shout Never EP, the classic, iconic, the Yippee EP was released, And it's safe to say that with this release, Christopher Drew's life was changed forever. This EP was monumental in the growth of the Never Shout Never hype machine, and also stands today as a bona fide MySpace-era classic, as well as officially setting the precedent and raising the bar for other MySpace artists around this time, who took great influence from Chris, such as the Ready Set or Steven Jerzak, and countless other artists like that around this time, Nicosaur, all that shit. The EP features 2 songs that were originally on the Demo-Shmemo, Smell You Later and Dare for Distance, which sound a lot smoother and more beefy and fleshed out than they did in demo form, as well as 2 new songs, Here Goes Nothing and Big City Dreams. 2 great tracks, which are probably 2 of the most important early Never Shout Never tracks that Chris had released up to that point. Here Goes Nothing is an upbeat, pop-punk influenced banger, the fastest and peppiest Never Shout Never song to date at that point, and this song just hits the spot as far as fucking MySpace scene music goes. It really captures that essence perfectly. The palm-muted guitar at the beginning with the classic, iconic, ahem, check 1, 2, alright, here goes nothing, grabs your attention by the throat right off the bat, and is a great, unique intro to an EP. The lyrics and vocal melodies are catchy as hell, the electronic dance drum beats complement the song perfectly. The soft piano and keys in the background add nicely to the vibe of the song and add a somber element. And the emotive bridge sounds like he's about to burst into tears while he's singing it. This song was something new and slightly different from the usual sounds of the scene at the time, and was a much bigger and more sort of eye-catching, noticeable sound than the Never Shout Never songs released prior to this EP. All of those things that I just said could also be said about the other new song on this EP, Big City Dreams. Chris Drew's first proper single, and what could be considered as somewhat of a statement coming from Chris, and a true landmark in his career, this song, Big City Dreams. The song is low-key and relaxed while still being emotionally moving with its bittersweet lyrics about weighing out the pros and cons about the small town you grew up in and reflecting on all the memories and nostalgia you have attached to it before leaving the town for bigger and better things despite the possible disapproval from other people in your life in that small town. And yes, this song was pretty autobiographical for Chris at this point. The release of this EP came with some pretty big hype as well as huge feats for Chris. For instance, the day after the Yippee EP was released, July 30th, Chris was featured on MTV's Total Request Live, aka TRL, on an unsigned artist showcase called On Your Radar, where Chris performed his single Big City Dreams on national television.
By the way, we have a huge online fan base. No record deal quite yet, though. We brought him on the show, give him a shot on national television. Next act has 30 to 40,000 MySpace plays per day. Singer-songwriter from Missouri, Never Shout Never. Round of applause. Now, this is the #1 unsigned artist on MySpace for 3 days in June, and you are one of the top 10 artists on Pure Volume 2. So how does that feel? It must feel great.
Yeah, it's awesome. Really, I never even expected it. Like 6 months ago, I was just recording in my basement and having a good time, you know? So, cool. I mean, it's awesome.
Very cool. Here he is, Never Shout Never. The stage is yours. Go ahead.
Alright, sweet. So I'm playing a song off an EP I just put out. It's called Big City Dreams. So yeah, have a good time. You say we're both little people and you like it that way, but...
Fucking huge, right? Also, in the September 2008 issue of Alternative Press, they featured Never Shout Never in their little unsigned artist section called AP&R, which is actually where I, yours truly, the cozy representative, first discovered Chris back in the day 11 years ago now. Crazy. On October 21st, a limited edition CD of the Yippee EP with bonus tracks and a poster became available at Hot Topic. It looked like this. There's the back. Here's the poster. Wow, look at that guy. Fucking crazy. Keep in mind, Christopher Drew was still only 17 years old at this point, and had only been doing Never Shout Never for roughly about a year. This is an insanely quick rise to success for a person so young. For right now, Never Shout Never is by all means blowing up, and the Yippee EP is doing great for Chris and his success, and it's well-deserved. The Yippee EP is a great EP and has really genuine and sincere songs coming from the toxic muck that was most of this MySpace wave. And Chris was full of natural talent and charm. He was no doubt deserving of the attention and hype he was receiving despite being so young and potentially not quite ready for it. Either way, at this point he was doing great, and the sky was truly the limit for Chris and Never Shout Never at this point. Some other interesting things from the era of the Yippee EP was was that, for one, Chris had a short-lived clothing line around this time called Love for All Clothing, with t-shirt designs like this. And I know these images are worse quality. It's weirdly hard to find images of these shirts, but we got this one that says, "I am one step closer to world peace." And this one, which has a religious undertone, I guess, it says, "People, you are precious in His sight." I'm not entirely sure what happened to this clothing line. I'm sure Chris started it as a way to make some extra cash to fund Never Shout Never, as well as his travels at this point. He probably started like, I need to sell some shirts, make some extra cash. But obviously Never Shout Never mania was just beginning at this time, and wealth and financial security was just around the corner for Chris, which he probably did not at all see coming. So maybe, once he began making a decent amount of money just by touring and releasing music, he didn't need to do this clothing line on the side anymore. I don't know for sure, this is just my speculation, but regardless, Love for All Clothing was very much a thing at this point, and those shirt designs are pretty funny now looking back. During this time, he released the iconic music video, the first Never Shout Never music video for the song Big City Dreams, where there's that girl who's on the string that Chris is following, and then she flies away like a kite on the string. Iconic, breathtaking. On November 17th, 2008, a Never Shout Never Christmas song entitled 30 Days was uploaded to MySpace as well as iTunes. A classic Never Shout Never acoustic jam that is about as smooth and warm and satisfying as a cup of hot apple cider on a chilly December day. He also went on tour with Hello Goodbye around this time, as well as Ascenders and A Million Different People and Play Radio Play. Now, before we turn to the next chapter of the early career of Never Shout Never, I will leave the Yippee EP era off with a quote from this interview with Chris from the tail end of 2008, just a few months after the release of Yippee, where Chris discusses his plans to make a full-length in December of that year and release it independently.
At this point, I'm staying independent. I think I'm going to put out that full-length independently and see where that takes me. I'm going to record it in December, and then we don't really know when it's going to be out, but we're just going to see how everything goes from there.
So, with all this being said, we will now transition into the next chapter, the next era of Chris's life and career. Oh, wait, before we do that, it's important to note that by December 2008, Chris removed the exclamation point from the name Never Shout Never on his MySpace page. More on that later as well. Okay, now, it's time to move on to the next chapter of Never Shout Never career. Here we go! Let's do it!
I'm in trouble, I'm an addict, I'm addicted to this girl. She's got my heart tied in a knot, and my stomach in a whirl. But even worse, I can't stop calling her. She's all I want and more. I mean, damn, what's not to adore?
So, on January 27th, 2009, Never Shout Never released a little mini EP entitled the Me and My Uke EP, which featured 3 songs all performed on the ukulele. The recordings were quite minimalist, all primarily just Chris's voice and 1 ukulele track with some minor percussion here and there. Despite being just a simple little EP, probably not meant to be taken too seriously, most likely meant as just sort of a placeholder to tide fans over while Chris was working on his full length at the time. The EP featured the song Trouble, which ironically enough is probably the most popular and most recognizable Never Shout Never song Chris ever made. It is currently the highest played Never Shout Never song on Spotify with 30 million plays, and in 2012 the song itself went gold. It's one of the cutesiest Never Shout Never songs, and it probably wasn't Chris's intention for this to be their biggest song ever. But that's the thing about fate, you can't control it or escape it. And whether he liked it or not, with Trouble, Chris had one big hit on his hands. One big success. He knocked it out of the park with that one. Aside from the unexpected hit, the EP featured the songs Your Biggest Fan and Did It Hurt, 2 more cutesy, innocent, and playful tracks about having crushes on girls. This is arguably the most cutesy music Never Shout Never released, and this was the point where Never Shout Never began to gain itself some critics.
Hi, I'm Christopher Drew, and I'm getting pumped for a show. You know what I do to get ready for a show? I smoke marijuana. You just thought I was a cute little innocent boy. Oh, you're wrong about that.
His swoopy hair and ukulele and high-pitched voice, and also his legions of dedicated fangirls definitely rubbed some masculine bros the wrong way. But anything that gets as popular as quick as Never Shout Never did is bound to get a fair share of haters, especially considering how young Chris was at this point, and how he hadn't quite blossomed as an artist yet. Never Shout Never was still very new, all things considered. But one thing the haters couldn't say shit about was the sheer influence and impact on the scene Chris was starting to have with his image, and with Trouble blowing up and the other music he had under his belt at this time. Because of this short 3-song EP alone, almost every MySpace kid went out and bought a ukulele and wrote cute lovesick ukulele songs of their own.
Here we go again, I'm looking at you as you're looking at me, and I'm thinking of ways that I can make you smile, make you happy. Cause she's a pretty, pretty girl if you ask me, and I really, 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 really want her to be with me.
Everyone had a ukulele EP. Despite the haters of his cutesy image being proven wrong by the undebatable amount of success of Chris's work thus far, as we dive into 2009, as I stated earlier, we begin to see Chris going through some growing pains, and being a bit more real with his fanbase about who he was as a person. Now that he was thrust into the public eye more than ever before, and as he starts to get a little bit older, keep in mind he was only 17 when he started this project a year prior, we see even Chris himself start to rebel against the cutesy, innocent image he had carved out for himself. But we'll get into that more in a second. After the release of the Me and My Uke EP, it was announced that yes, Chris was in the studio recording his first full-length with Hello Goodbye's frontman Forrest Klein, and the first single for that album, entitled Happy, would be released on iTunes on March 3rd, 2009. Also, the very first Never Shout Never headlining tour was announced for February and March of that year, entitled the Let's Get Happy Tour, with support from the Scene Aesthetic, the Honorary Title, and the Bigger Lights. Big things were happening, yes, big things indeed for young Christofer. In order to beef up the Never Shout Never live show, a live band called The Shout was added. The first lineup of The Shout on the Let's Get Happy tour featured Taylor McPhee on the bass and backup vocals, as well as Nathan Ellison on the drums. As I had mentioned, around this time, Chris had decided to get a little more real and unreserved about his true identity with his fans. More so than he ever had before. With this, he also became pretty much the king of the MySpace blog, doing a series of blogs on his MySpace page entitled The Real Me, which were quite a big deal at the time. Here's the first one, published on January 17th, 2009. I won't read the whole thing, but here it is on screen. I'll just point out some interesting bullet points from it, and you can pause it and read it if you want. 1. The last thing I want to be is a pop star. I started Never Shout Never to pass the time. I just write songs to get emotions or thoughts out of my mind. I don't want to be famous, although I would love for my music to touch as many people as possible. 2. For any girl who thinks they are in love with me, you aren't. You don't know me, and if you did, you probably wouldn't like me as much. Anyways, I don't look very good in person. You can thank the modern technology of Photoshop for that. Pretty interesting. Here's the second one where he talks about his vegan diet, his love for Jesus Christ, and as well as growing up in the hardcore scene. And now for the third one, where things get a bit spicy. 2. Do you smoke? First off, smoking is a nasty habit, although I have been found guilty a couple of times. This was a big deal at the time, although now currently, Christofer Drew's image is synonymous with weed and cigarette smoking. There was a point where this dude's image was so squeaky clean that no one had any idea or even assumption that he had a smoking habit. It broke a lot of young girls' hearts back in the day. I know, I remember it. These blogs became a very big part of the whole Christofer Drew lore at this point, and Chris really started to create a culture around himself and his music, via his MySpace and his honest relationship with his fans. Because of this transparency, many people felt like they knew Chris personally and started to build a virtual connection with him, even though the connection was through the internet and was somewhat one-sided. Still, this was an element of this era of Never Shout Never that was very unique and something not many artists took the time to do. For fans, Never Shout Never really felt like it was my friend Chris, as opposed to, oh, just this band that I like. Now, I'm not going to dive too deep into these Real Me blogs because that could be a whole video in itself, but I'll flash some more on the screen if you want to pause and read them on your own. Here's the fourth one, as well as the fifth one. Okay, anyways, back to where we left off. So, Never Shout Never gets off of the Let's Get Happy tour. The supposed first full-length album is all recorded and ready to be released. Things are good. So, let's get into this full length. On Saturday, February 1st, 2009, Chris posted this blog onto his MySpace. Wow. Current mood. Excited. I can't believe it's over. I finally finished the album. It has been my dream to put out a full length my entire life. Dreams come true. The single drops in like 2 weeks. I guess the reason I'm writing this is because I can't sleep. Excitedness. I love you guys. You are the best fans that a loser like me could ever ask for. Whoop. Sleepy time. Z. Christopher Drew. However, on March 29th, Chris posted this blog. I just got off my first headlining tour. I have to say it was incredible. Everyone was so supportive and loving. Thanks. Now I am back home until early Tuesday morning. I've been relaxing and eating a lot. I got back some of the mixes that were for the record. I am super pumped on some of them, but I feel like I could do so much better on a handful of them as well. So here's what we're going to do. We are going to put out a summer EP which will have 6 songs on it. It will be out in mid-June. Whoop! So yes, he went back on his plans to release his first full-length, decided he did not want to do it because he felt like he did not do a good enough job on the whole finished final product. And in comes the announcement of the next Never Shout Never release, the summer EP.
Anyway, this first song is called Happy. You make me happy, whenever you know it wrong, you should be happy. That's what I said from the start. I am so happy, knowing you are the one I want for the rest of my days. For the rest of my days.
The summer EP was released... Oh, wait. The summer EP, haha! There it is. Was released on June 23rd, 2009, and featured 6 new songs. Some interesting things about this EP release are that, and this is a big one, this is Chris's first release on Warner Brothers Records. Woo! Holy shit! Which he had recently been signed to leading up to the release of this EP. Pretty fucking crazy, I know. From what I understand, there was quite a big major label bidding war for Never Shout Never during this time, and it just made more sense for Chris to sign to a label than to keep releasing music independently like he had originally planned. So Chris was now on Warner Brothers and also had his own imprint label off of Warner called Loveway Records, which this EP was released through. Another interesting thing is that this was the first Never Shout Never release where the name, the band name, Never Shout Never, was stylized as 3 separate words and no longer appears as one word with an exclamation point at the end. This, along with Chris being more open about things like his cigarette and weed habits, caused somewhat of a frenzy among fans who preferred the name the way it was before, all connected and whatnot, and also preferred Chris the way he was before, all squeaky clean and all that. Although legally and contractually the official spelling was Never Shout Never, as 3 separate words, Chris would often change it on the header of his MySpace back and forth between the 2 spellings, between 3 separate words and all one with exclamation point, stating that it was 1 word when he was happy and 3 words when he was sad or something like that. Anyways, the summer EP starts off with the song Happy.
You make me happy.
Which sounds like it could have been somewhat of a theme song for Never Shout Never, a simple ukulele banger, kind of like something from the Me and My Uke EP, but beefed up a little more, with Chris's signature smooth, high-pitched, cutesy vocals and catchy melodies with lyrics about falling in love. Starting this EP off with this song is a smart move, in my opinion, because it gives people a bit of the standard, classic Never Shout Never sound people were already used to. Something not too surprising or out of the box to start off with. Something easily digestible to, ease people into this EP. Following this, the EP wanders off into some new territory Chris's fans were not necessarily used to as far as Never Shout Never's sound goes. The second track, Hummingbird, introduces a live band sound on the recording, with drums performed by Aaron Flora and bass performed by Forrest Klein, both members of the band Hello Goodbye, and everything else performed by Chris himself. This song is a bit of a vibey slow jam, a respite before launching into track 3, I Just Laugh. This is probably the most peppy and upbeat Never Shout Never song since Here Goes Nothing, except this one has real drums and multiple real electric guitars. The first Never Shout Never song to sound like a true, full electric rock band. A great feel-good summer song too, catchy, playful, and refreshing, definitely a highlight on this EP and a mark of growth for Chris and the Never Shout Never sound. Simple Enough is a sweet, catchy track that eases back into the more classic Never Shout Never style with stripped-down instrumentation. On the Bright Side, which lyrically was pretty experimental and out there for Never Shout Never at the time, is a simple acoustic song with folky vibes that became one of Chris's most popular songs and a staple in his live show. The closing track, called Losing It, is a somber, stripped-down ballad about Chris's first relationship and subsequently him losing his virginity to a girl who ended up cheating on him multiple times. The sad song features a ukulele, some strings, some mandolin, kind of reminiscent of the song Oh It Is Love by Hello Goodbye. And that would make sense because this EP was recorded by Forrest Klein of Hello Goodbye, obviously, as I've said a bunch of times already. The EP is very solid and shows growth and experimentation for Chris while also staying true to his past music. I think this definitely could have been a full length if Chris wanted, but either way, it's a very well-rounded EP that marks a nice, innocent time in Chris's career. Truly good songs on this one, a truly solid EP, I must say. Following the release of the summer EP, Never Shout Never went on the MTV U tour that June and July of 2009 with Boys Like Girls and the Ready Set. Also around this time, Chris had expanded the lineup of his live band The Shout. It now featured Caleb Dennison on lead guitar, Nathan Ellison on the drums, Taylor McPhee on bass, Dustin Dobrnig on keyboard, and Hayden Kaiser on extra percussion. These were Chris's friends, local musicians from around Joplin, and Taylor and Hayden, and also Dennison, also played with Chris in their side project metalcore band Eat Me While I'm Hot. And this lineup of The Shout with these dudes would follow Chris into the next year and a half or so. After this EP release, as well as expanding the Never Shout Never live band to be a little bit more beefed up, Chris received a little bit of a backlash from people about changing up his style a little bit. You know, not being just a solo acoustic guitar guy anymore, more of a full band kind of thing. People were a little bit mad, and he posted this Real Me blog clearing some things up. Notice in this blog his tone is a little less cutesy and less friendly than usual. He's a bit more stern and giving it to you straight up. Hello, my dearests. Here are some answers to your questions. I loves you, and hope none of these offend you. I've had a weird day, so I may be a little rough. Why did you get a live band? Honestly, I got a live band so I could take some of my best friends on tour with me. It makes the whole experience a little more fun. I know some of you hate it, but you haters have to understand that I do what makes me and my best friends happy, not you. Why does your music suck now? You probably mean, why is your music not just acoustic anymore? Honestly, it is just some harmless experimentation. I will always be an acoustic singer-songwriter, but I like to have some fun with other sounds and instruments too. You can either linger in the past or grow with me. Your call. I love you regardless. Alright, y'all. Well, there we have it. That concludes part 1. I hope you enjoyed it. Stay tuned for part 2. We're going to pick up right where we left off and explore why Chris was so moody in that blog and go into the What Is Love album, as well as perhaps the Harmony album and perhaps the Time Travel album. Follow him through his, his ever-changing, ever-growing journey. But for now, that was the MySpace era. Were you a fan of Chris back in the MySpace day, or did you find him later and go back and explore the old shit? Let me know. I hope you enjoyed this video. This has been the Cozy Representative, as always, coming at ya. I love ya. I will see you next time. Peace.